done with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent, you won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.
Good evening and welcome back to the Belfast Bapcast. So tonight we are doing layer 2, which is the institutional failure, following on from episode 1 last week. So layer 1 showed us what collapse looks like at the surface level, and 2 will show us why the surface collapses. So institutions fail long before the public notice. By the time ordinary people feel the shockwave, the internal structure has already rotted. Most people misunderstand institutional collapse because they see symptoms, not the actual architecture. They think the systems fail because of bad leaders or budget cuts or incompetence or generational change, but institutional failure doesn't begin with weakness, it begins with self-protection. When institutions prioritize survival over service, image over integrity, and narrative over truth, and hierarchy over responsibility, collapse becomes mathematically guaranteed. Now, when we had Jon Wedger on, former detective at Scotland Yard, he provides a clear, concrete, irrefutable model of institutional corruption. He didn't expose bad apples. He exposed systems, patterns, and protocols designed to shield the institution from accountability. So what he says, whistleblowers attacked, not protected, senior officers burying evidence, systematic silencing of abuse victims, prosecutions blocked for political convenience, and leadership prioritizing reputation over justice. Now, this isn't speculation. It's the testimony of a veteran investigator who tried to protect the public and was punished for it. So some supporting data. So the UK Independent Office for Police Conduct reported a 60% rise in complaints over the last decade. The Casey Review concluded the Metropolitan Police is institutionally racist, misogynistic, and homophobic. Well, there's a shock. 72% of misconduct allegations resulted in no actions, almost like the system is protecting the system. These are not anomalies. These are indicators of system failure. And Jon Wedger's insight is critical. When the enforcement arm collapses, society loses its spine. And then we had Kevin Annett, who his work obviously exposes the second pillar of collapse, which is the religious institutions used as political and administrative control systems. His investigations into residential schools uncovered mass abuses, systematic cover-ups, collusion between church and state, destruction of evidence, cultural erasure, unmarked graves. This isn't historic rumour, it's documented fact. So a statistic record would be over 150,000 Indigenous children forcibly taken from families, over 4,100 confirmed deaths with estimates over 10,000. 70% of schools operated by the church institutions. The institution meant to uphold the moral authority instead facilitated one of the largest state-supported abuses in modern history. And Annett shows that institutional failure is not administrative, it is moral, it is spiritual, and it is systematic. When the moral institutions collapse internally, the civilization built on them collapses internally also. And then we had FBI whistleblower Colleen Rowley. She was in the intelligence, obviously, and bureaucratic interior of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. So early exposed that there was political interference in investigations. Intelligence silence to prevent internal oversight. Whistleblowers punished for accuracy, truth treated as a liability in some instances, narratives prioritized over actual national security. And the record based evidence for that is US intelligence repeatedly ignored dozens of warnings before major threats, per congressional reports. Whistleblowers' complaints have increased 22% annually since 2015. Internal audits show repeated violations in surveillance oversight, and intelligence agencies do not collapse because field agents malfunction. They collapse because leadership becomes politically captured. And once intelligence agencies become narrative managers, truth becomes negotiable and trust becomes impossible. So, the media side of things, so I really think Paula Bradshaw, they're so used to be getting soft ball questions, and when pressed slightly by myself, she folded. And a civilization cannot function without a coherent information system. And when media has become propaganda, collapse accelerates. And that is also the alternative media as well in some cases. Now, only 38% of people worldwide trust the mainstream media news, which is good. That's certainly an improvement. In the UK, trust in broadcasters dropped from 51% to 34% in 5 years. For people under the age of 30, social media is now the primary and deeply unreliable, apparently, news source. Media institutions are no longer truth systems, they are narrative systems. And when narrative replaces truth, collapse becomes unavoidable. Then the one, the only Johnny Cirucci. So this is the interlocking of the hierarchies. So institutions are not independent, they are interdependent. Political, religious, intelligence, financial, academic, and cultural structures interlock like gears. When our gear breaks, the other strain grinds and eventually fail. Cirucci's work reveals institutional hierarchies share ideological origins. Authority structures survive regime changes. The CIA basically built and started by religious institutions. Political power is scaffolded by spiritual frameworks, and control systems have been deeply infiltrated historically. So this explains why collapse appears synchronized, because the institutions have the same root system, and when the root rots, everything connected to it collapses. So here's the truth that most people will avoid. Institutions do not fail because they lose capacity. They fail because they lose, nor ever in some cases had, legitimacy, and try to hide that fact. Self-protective institutions become secretive, brittle, punitive, dishonest, hostile to reform, and allergic to truth. This is the turning point where collapse becomes irreversible and the institution stops serving the public and starts serving its own survival. And at that momentum, the public senses the change. Layer one erupts and collapse becomes visible. So when layer two fails and layer one cracks, when institutions rot, the surface world fractures. But to understand why the institutions behave this way, we must descend into the layer beneath them, and the layer that explains why history doesn't add up, why timelines feel compressed, why architecture contradicts narrative, why population movement looks engineered, why curriculum was rewritten, why entire civilizations seem to vanish without a trace. Layer three is where the illusion begins to break, and once you see what lies beneath the official version of history, you can never really return to the surface. So that will be in episode 3, and obviously thank you very much for tuning in. If you could like, share, and subscribe. And layer 3 is going to be a mind blower.
Only in the looking back in life are you able to discern that you were being crafted through every little concern. Furs and trials attacked because you had a role. And this is why there's been a constant fight for your soul. The furthest into the world I've been, debauchery, iniquity was all I seen. The pleasure dome